Hello, my name is Langston Thomas, and in today's video speech, I'm going to be telling you about the 13th Amendment and the criminal justice system. After slavery was abolished in 1865, Southern states where more than 90% of black Americans lived embraced criminal justice as a means of racial control. Discriminatory black codes led to the imprisonment of unprecedented numbers of black men, women, and children who were returned to slavery-like conditions through forced labor and convict leasing systems that lasted well into the 20th century. The black codes were laws that were introduced in the southern states restricting the freedom of black people and the right to own property, conduct businesses, buy and lease land, and move freely through public spaces such as southern towns. The freedom of ex-slaves was restricted in numerous ways, including 1. Permission to travel, 2. Segregation, 3. Different laws and punishments, 4. Limited choice in employment and strict labor contracts, 5. Permission required from employers to sell farm produce, 6. Banned from bearing arms. 7. Orphans were placed into forced apprenticeships. 8. Preventing free men and to vote and serve juries. It's hard to understand why African Americans are incarcerated at higher rates than other groups without knowing what the black codes were. These restrict and discriminatory laws criminalized blacks after slavery and set the stage for Jim Crow. The purpose of black codes was to 1. Regain control over the freed slaves, 2. Inhibit the freedom of freed slaves, 3. Prevent black uprisings, 4. Ensure the continued supply of cheap labor, 5. Maintain segregation, 6. Maintain white supremacy, 7. Imprison black men, women, and children. These laws sent more black people to prison than ever before. By the late 19th century, the country experienced its first prison boom. The institution of slavery and the black codes that followed reveal how the state penalized blacks just for existing. The 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution abolished slavery and involuntary servitude, except as punishment for crime. After Reconstruction, African Americans were forced back into the system of extreme repression and control based on the 13th Amendment. States put prisoners to work through a practice called convict leasing, which meant white planters and industrialists leased prisoners to work for them. So basically, they got put right back into slavery again after getting put out of slavery again. States and private businesses made money doing this, but prisoners didn't. Black prisoners found themselves living and working on plantations against their will and for no pay decades after the Civil War. The exception clause in the 13th Amendment was, and still is, responsible for a prison system that incarcerates black people more than 5 times the rate of white people, and profits off their unpaid or underpaid labor. 1. The United States has the world's highest incarceration rate. 2.3 million Americans are in prison today, or 34% of the total 6.8 million correctional population. 2. African Americans are incarcerated at more than 5 times the rate of whites. 3. The imprisonment rate for African American women is twice of that of white women. 4. Nationwide, African American children represents 32% of children who are arrested, 42% of children who are detained, and 52% of children whose cases are judicially waived to criminal court. 5. Though African Americans and Hispanics make up approximately 37% of the U.S. population, They comprise 56% of all incarcerated people. If African Americans and Hispanics were incarcerated at the same rates as white, prisons and jails population would decline by almost 40%. People of color are the only Americans not protected from modern day slavery and incarcerated at alarming numbers, most of the time for non-violent offenses. They are forced into labor by the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. In the past, states have benefited and profited from the prison labor by forcing chain gangs to build roads and create prison farms to grow crops like sugar and snap peas. Today, states and private companies still rely on prisoners performing free and or extremely low-paid labor for them. For example, California saves up to $100 million a year by recruiting incarcerated people as volunteer firefighters. An Ohio company that supplies parts to Honda pays its prison workers $2 an hour for the same work regular union auto workers are paid $20 to $30 an hour for. One government-managed prison labor agency produces equipment for U.S. Department of Defense. Check this out. While the violent crime rate in the United States has fallen by about 20% since 1991, the number of inmates in the United States prisons and jails has grown by 50%. The construction of new prisons solely for their profit potential will result in the unjust and lengthy imprisonment of millions of additional Americans, with a disproportionately high number of the poor and people of color being jailed. The prison industry complex was designed for the wholesale incarceration of black communities. Asian Pacific Islanders and other non-black people of color are trapped in the same system. Southeast Asians and Latinos are all incarcerated at disproportionate rates. This is the result of the 13th Amendment. The 13th Amendment did not abolish slavery, but rather moved it from the plantation to the prisons. Thank you for watching, and I hope you learned about the 13th Amendment and the criminal justice system against black people. Thank you.